Out. Ladies and gentlemen, Bruce Potter.
Hey! All right, so I'm Bruce. I'm really loud, so this will be fun for the audio guy. I like to troll them, so I'll back up from the microphone and move toward it. There'll be feedback. It's really exciting. I've been starting my talks the same way for the last 20 years, give or take, and I encourage you not to believe anything I'm about to tell you. There's a wide variety of reasons for that. I'm a serial liar, so that's a good starting point. But I'm also a college dropout. I went to school at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, which is, anyone go to UAF? Right? It's one of the few schools that actually is an acronym for a security thing, use after free. So I have a UAF t-shirt. It's geeky, and it's where I dropped out of. I went there for 4 years and decided I didn't like doing it and ended up running system network operations for the largest ISP in Alaska and doing a bunch of other wacky crap. But like a lot of other people from my generation, I got into cybersecurity because I thought it was interesting, and I did it kind of on the side. I was self-taught. I had a bunch of random crap under my desk that we would build systems out of and break and have fun understanding how the world worked, but we didn't learn it in a structured way. So I didn't really know if I was learning the right things. I was just learning things. If you're over the age of 33, you probably don't have an undergraduate degree in anything cybersecurity related because most of those degree programs didn't exist. You could have a graduate degree program, if you went to Purdue and studied under SPAF, or you went to Hopkins with Avi Rubin or something like that, you might have a graduate program in cyber, but you were not trained in this in any kind of structured way. In my generation, I'm in my 40s, there are a lot of people who got into this who came from all kinds of different directions. And we still have that today, right? The hacker ethos is still like, I learn, I like it, I do it, but coincidentally, I may have also gone to $20,000 worth of training and taken a 4-year graduate program or undergraduate program into college, which is very different than the things that I went through. So by and large, what I'm about to express to you is my personal opinion based on my personal experiences. I've tried to wash out my own personal biases and things of that nature, but some of it will shine through. I will encourage you, if you disagree with me, if you think what I'm saying is bullshit, throw something at me. I'm not making that up. People that have been to ShmooCon or know what we do, we arm you with little squishy foam rubber balls and tell you to throw them at the speaker. You probably don't have foam rubber balls, but you, sir, have a drone, so I'm going to work at my best to just really offend you and see if I can, or the beer as well. Like we've got, maybe throw that in small 1-ounce increments at me, and that'll be okay. So before we really get started with this talk, and this talk is going to go nowhere, right? Like you've been lost in a car, not where you're going. This is the next 45 minutes. We are lost in the woods in rural Carolina. We will come out on the main road at the end and you won't know what the hell just happened. So I'm just saying, you are wearing the shirt. God damn it. So, can you stand up, sir? You have googly eyes on it even. Can you turn around? So, that's my likeness on a shirt. And I've tried to buy that off the market because I don't like them. And there was $100 a shirt, as it turns out. We can go to the ATM after and I'll buy that shirt off you. I'm attempting to reclaim this. It's really disconcerting to go to the Columbia Mall in Maryland and someone walks past you, your face is on their shirt. You're like, and that actually happened, and I walked up to the guy, and I pulled out a wad of cash, and I'm like, I'll give you this for your shirt. And my wife, she was just appalled. And in response, of course, for the next ShmooCon, she did a reprint. So there were 200 more shirts on the market. That's the first gen. Man, that's OG Bow to My Firewall shirt. That's great. So this is starting really well. I've been a consultant for a long time. I'm a CISO right now, and so that basically means I'm the scapegoat. But in the past, I was a dirty capitalist. I did anything for money. A big part of my job as a consultant was to provide conceptual models for our customers so that they can understand their problems and then understand a solution to make their life better, right? When we would sit down and do a scoping conversation with a customer just trying to figure out what they needed, when we proposed to them the work that we wanted to do, we would write up a 1 or 2 page, our understanding of the problem. So it's parroting back here's what we think we heard from you to make sure that we're on the same page. And there were a number of times where customers said, I would have paid you for the proposal, right? You added clarity to my business because you were able to create a model for my company that helped me understand my problems better. And that was just in the proposal, right? There was one technology company we interviewed people for a day, all these portfolio managers had all these products, they really didn't understand how they all stitched together, and then we drew a diagram like, this is how all your products fit together, and they're like, holy crap, that's our company. I'm like, right, your security consultant shouldn't be doing the vision stuff, right? Like that's not okay. So when I think about security, I think of there's different parts of security and security operations, the responding to events and alerts and actually operating the big levers of the controls that we have and things of that nature is really a trailing indicator of the security industry at large, right? Because at the end of the day, you can only be as secure as the things that you buy. You can't be like wickedly frustrated with Microsoft and say, I think I'll build my own operating system, right? Because it's not 1992 anymore and your name's not Linus, right? You don't get to do these things, you just get to go buy an operating system. You are welcome to try to build your own CRM, but you're better off to go buy Salesforce, right? These are things that you don't have a choice. You buy from the marketplace, you don't build. So that got me thinking, I'm presenting off an iPad for the first time, so like this is gonna go really well. There's a theoretical maximum to how secure you can be. And if you buy shitty products, your theoretical maximum is very low, right? Now, I know you've seen the Mythbusters episode where they actually polish shit into a shiny ball. And so there are rare occasions when like you can make the bar is higher. Who's seen that one, right? That was a pretty good episode. They made a nice big ball of poo. I'm like, wow, that was pretty cool. There are rare occasions where your theoretical maximum is better, but that's just because like you did the Herculean work of polishing that ball of poo. In reality, what you need is a system that has more potential security, right? You can think of this as like, if you want to get like kind of physics on this, the bottom's kind of your kinetic security, like the security that exists. The light green is the potential security. It's the security that could exist if you have the time and the energy and the staff and the resources to configure. It's like for those of you that do like AWS security, and every time that reInvent happens and there's more security tools that come out, like that bar just keeps going higher, and you're like, I don't understand how to do any of it, but I'm sure there's a class or a contractor or a third-party product that Amazon will make obsolete in the next year, because that's what happens every year at reInvent. They make a bunch of companies obsolete when they're like, oh, there was a problem, and we fixed it, and now you're all out of business. So when I think of security operations, I think of those are the levers, those are the controls that exist. That's your SOC, that's your IT security people. That's what they can do. Closing that gap starts to become an engineering exercise, right? This is the kind of thing where, you know, I'm trying to figure out how to plug things in better, how to integrate these controls better, how to make my system better given that potential security space that I'm operating in. Well, that's cool and all, but how do we push the ball forward, right? This is clearly a dynamic environment that changes every year. So ultimately, what we want to be doing is building more secure systems. So this is either internally, I'm building more secure systems for my customers, or externally, I'm building products and services for consumption and sale that I need to build security into, I need to make more secure, right? This is Microsoft and the Trusted Computing Letter, and Bill Gates saying we have to build more trustworthy systems, right? This is that mantra of like, we're gonna build things that are more secure. That usually has kind of a near-term time window, right? That's an engineering problem. You're using existing off-the-shelf techniques and capabilities to build more secure systems. So in my mind, that kind of building more secure systems has like a 2-year life cycle, right? When you start thinking, I need to make things more secure from the get-go, in 2 years' time, I'm probably doing that. On top of that, then, there's the final level, which is foundational research in security, right? This is the work that, again, Google and Microsoft will put their own money into, but DARPA, NSF, organizations like that put their money into as well. That's long time horizon type activity, right? So that's the kind of thing where the payoff is long, it's risky, but it can have immense benefit to us as a society if it works. Now, if you are like Joe's Auto Parts Shop and you're running a SOC, you're not thinking, what I really need to do is invent a better way to sandbox applications and maybe find a better way to do process isolation so there's not side channel leaks on processors, right? Like for your muffler shop, those are not things that you're going to spend time on. As much as you may conceptually think those are really cool problems, you're not going to get paid to do it. If you do, you should go start your own company and stop working for the muffler shop. Also, if you work at the muffler shop, it's really hard to recruit security professionals, right? It's really hard to be compelling when you're in that space. So one of the challenges we have from an MSSP perspective is actually hiring people. And it turns out we're kind of attractive in that regard because people can come here and they can solve all kinds of cool problems and lots of different customers. If you are in a non-attractive part of the country, and I don't mean to disparage any particular part of the country, everyone has their own biases of what parts they find attractive and not attractive, but there are parts in general that aren't attractive as a universal state. It's kind of a joke, sorry, that was, wow, that one fell flat. I was gonna keep right on. Right, I did not disparage Raleigh or Durham in either of those statements, by the way. It was more geared at Ohio. So, and most of the room's like, yeah, Ohio, that's about right. You have a really hard time recruiting when you're also competing against Amazon, Google, various security companies, that kind of thing. So in general, you're hiring security operators who are only gonna bend the levers that you're able to buy. So, why do I bring this up? When I start thinking about what does the future hold, which ostensibly is kind of the purpose of this talk, you know, it's useful to have a model of like how we can affect the future. And the future, as much as like we can make changes in the SOC, we can make changes on an operational basis, it doesn't have a material change on the world, right? We are a trailing indicator of how shitty the thing is. And the fact that a lot of people need to exist in security operations is a testament to how bad all our systems are. Nothing else, right? We can be very good at our trade, but that doesn't mean we're necessarily making the world more secure. We're just holding back the dam, right? We're keeping everything from falling down. That's security operations' job. It's the job of the people up top to make sure we have better products in the long run, so we need fewer people holding the dam up. And I've held people to account as best I can in my role to that regard. I actually got asked to speak at the DARPA Cyber Colloquium a number of years ago where I kind of read the riot act to the DARPA director on stage about not funding cybersecurity research enough. And I still retain my research contracts that I had with DARPA, so I was pretty pleased with how that all turned out. But there have to be organizations like that who are thinking about greater good issues at the top of this in order to make our lives better at the bottom of this. Anyway, so I have a question for you. Sir, you have a question? Yes, that's what we're going to get to next. The question, isn't the sea level continuing to rise? And that's exactly what I'm going to get to next. Well, that's what I'm going to ask you. Okay, all right. This is my straight man. I like this. I did not pay you yet, sir, but I will pay you soon. Yeah. Yeah, take. God damn it. First edition only. So I'm going to show you 3 graphs, and you have to tell me which graph you think is the right graph. So there are 3 views, potentially, and I'm leading the witness here. There are potentially 3 ways to view the cybersecurity industry. We can look at the amount of work that we've done versus the amount of work that there is to do, like what the attackers are capable of in that kind of space, as parallel lines, never to converge, never to diverge, right? This is the Sisyphus problem. I do the same thing every day, and I'm exactly the same place at the end of it as I was in the beginning of it. Wash, rinse, repeat. I've been doing this for 25 years. There are certainly times in which I feel like I'm that dude. I'm not as chiseled and cut as he is because I'm not Athenian or Greece or whatever Sisyphus was, Roman. I always get confused, Roman, Greek mythology. Right? Anyone know Sisyphus? Pretty sure Greek? All right, we'll go with Greek. Thank you, Wikipedia. Or is it the abandon all hope view, where it's divergent? These lines are not only not intersecting, they're getting farther apart. Anyone watch Invader Zim and know the Doom song? Doom, da, doom, doom, doom. Yeah, yeah. Doom, yeah, that was wild with the inflection and everything. That was. Were you the voice actor, sir? Oh, yeah, I kind of wish I was a cartoon as well, sir. And then there's the much more hopeful view of rainbow shitting unicorns, where at some point in the future, just past the horizon, they connect, right? So, if I can rewind, who thinks we're this one? All right, a handful. Who thinks we're this one? Potentially a supermajority. Who thinks we're this one? One person. Maybe someone in the balcony, but I'm blind. I believe we are actually this one. But also, I also believe that's not correct. this is the reality, right? Like, it's a wild ride, my friends, right? There's ups and downs. It's super exciting to all of us geeks, and when you explain it to the lay people, they're like, that's really boring, right? Like, all of that was terrifying. I don't understand any of those words, but thank you. I was able to sleep, so I appreciate that. You've cured my insomnia. What I want to call out, though, in this completely imaginary graph that I made in Illustrator based on lots of data analysis that I did, is that there are transformative events that occur in cybersecurity that cause kind of step functions either in attacker or defender capability, right? We are not linear, right? There are things, I mean, the example that one of the examples I like to call out is shell shock, right? Like, or not shell shock, excuse me, Heartbleed. Like, the day before Heartbleed came out, we weren't really thinking of a threat model that involved adversaries from around the world reading all the memory off of all of our SSL protected web servers, right? People weren't really thinking like, how do I protect against that? Like, well, I don't know, drink more vodka, because that's a really stupid threat. Like, that will never happen. And then he woke up the next morning like, ha, I told you that would happen. It transformed us, and now we think about, like, there may be another one of these things like Heartbleed, where at a distance someone can do something to my frontline servers that's so catastrophic that I have to react in minutes and patch and fix my servers and do all kinds of things that I didn't think I had to do the day before. So that's a transformative step function. There are other iterative things that change over time, but there are a few things that you can point at and say, like, that's a big deal. As an example, from an attacker perspective, the use of return-oriented programming to be able to bypass certain protections on operating systems and applications was a big deal, right? Like, ROP enabled all kinds of exploits that you couldn't exploit prior to ROP existing. On the flip side, ASLR, address space layout randomization, where memory spaces inside of programs are randomized, that made it very difficult for legacy type attacks to work, and required something like ROP to come along and transform that. So when Microsoft pushed out ASLR in XP Service Pack 3, it was a big deal, right? Like, it made it a lot harder for attackers. It was a good thing for us. You'll notice there are points here in which the slope is negative, and I contend there are times we go the wrong goddamn direction. So, from an attacker's perspective, like, when you start outing APT groups, post Google Aurora, post some of the DIB attacks that were going on, and some of these APT groups, Mandiant and crew started outing them, that slows them down, right? They don't have operational cover anymore because we're sharing information about them. I mean, that's a big deal. On the flip side, so I was noodling on this the other day. I bought like a Pentium 4 a while ago, to be clear, like, not like last week. And that critter clocked out at 3.8 gigahertz or some nonsense. Well, you buy a processor right now, and actually you don't really have any clue how fast it is. Like, Intel's given up on that war because Moore's law kind of trailed off a little bit. And instead, what we rely on is heavily parallelized execution. 100% what allows us to have wicked performance on our iPhones and stuff like that is not that the 20 gigahertz processor in here, it's that the processor can execute 64 threads at a shot, right? Remember, some of you weren't born yet. But remember, the desire to have a symmetric multiprocessor system was, somebody made a dual proc Celeron board, right? I owned one. It was a server. It was glorious. It was the cheapest, dirtiest server, but it could run 2 threads at a time on Celeron processors. It was awesome. And now we take for granted the fact that you can run multiple threads, many threads at a shot at any given moment. That's what allows us to have fast computing. As it turns out, it's also what allows us to leak lots of data through side channels, to have all kinds of other idiotic security things happen, because no one actually understands the modern processor architecture. It is psychotically complicated, right? The people who design the chips don't know. There are operating systems inside the chips that can be patched on the fly. What? I thought silicon was silicon. No, this is pretend silicon that can be reprogrammed and changed and all kinds of things. And then when you get these side channel attacks and you have to back out all the stuff that allows all this stupid stuff for Spectre and Meltdown to exist, the processors get slower. Who knew, right? Breathe. This is where you tell Bruce, you should breathe once in a while. All right. If you're Amazon and you've got, say, hectares of frickin' servers, and then one day this stuff comes out and Intel's like, by the way to fix this so you don't get owned is do this thing that decreases the performance by 40%. Amazon's like, I guess I'll buy Rhode Island and pave it and fill it with data centers to make up the difference, because that screws up my business model, right? Like, that's a material problem for cloud providers when Intel says, by the way, these patches, and we're still contending with this. Like, for those of you who run Nessus scans on a regular basis, like every goddamn month there's a new Spectre and Meltdown thing that you have to care about. Like, how much do you care about it? Not at all, right? I don't care about it. No one's on my box. No one's gonna do side channel stuff. Side channel attacks are cool and all, but they're like rarefied air. They're slightly less rare than people using weak cipher suites on SSL connections to get credit card numbers, right? Because that's a thing that has never happened, right? For the PCI people in the room, I get emails every once in a while for ShmooCon where someone's like, you allow weak ciphers for your SSL suite. I want to go through the internet and choke the person, like literally like reach through. Because here's what would happen as an attacker. Let me just paint you a picture. First of all, I have to be in a place in which I can watch the SSL connection. Nice! You are the PCI guy. Oh, Jeff is pointing out that it's NIST problem. This is going to be a deep rabbit hole. Like, woo! We're gonna come out the other side of the world. But he did throw food, which I appreciate. So, yeah, well, if it was a beer, I'd be coming down to thank you. Wow, where the hell, what were we talking about? PCI, right. So, the first ShmooCon tickets for everybody. This is the start of the talk, by the way. Just buckle up. Like, if you had dinner plans, you could throw them right the hell out. Anyway, so the problem is I have to be in a spot where I can see the transaction. Okay, I have now man in the middle of the network somewhere, okay? Wireless network that had a crack to get into, or I've compromised an ISP and latched onto an OC 192 and I found an SSL session that uses a weak cipher. And then what? Could I just pay a guy? Like, yeah. Or I could go like all human and I paid it's very complicated, but at some point I expended an asinine amount of energy to get one SSL session. It's still encrypted. So then I take it and I throw it up into Amazon and say, I have all the power and a credit card because I have to pay for this. And I grind on it and $25 later, I've cracked the session. Yay! And I open it up and it's a cat GIF. Damn it! So I go back into the data center, and I wait for another SSL session, and I get it. And I go back, and it's another cat GIF, right? After about $1 million, I find the credit card number, and I use it to commit $100 of fraud before it shut off, and my return on investment is really negative, and I've made bad choices in life, and I'm gonna go mine Bitcoin instead. So that's my impression of PCI. Sorry, Jeff. It's NIST's fault. I know. I think my actual better thing would just be hit a dude in the head and steal his wallet. Like, at the end of the day, like, the most successful crime is one that you know is gonna work like that. Like, humans are still bludgeonable, so you know, we've known about bludgeoning for a while, but we have not come up with anti-bludgeoning defenses. So there's no, unless that, I do wear a helmet a lot, just in case I get bludgeoned, so anyway. Random Back to the Future thing. Anyone read this report? Anyone know what this report is? But it turns out it's in English and on the screen. This is an Air Force study from 1972. I would encourage you all to go read it, right? I used to reference this report a lot, and I haven't referenced it in probably 10 years. And I went back and reread it a couple days ago. Computer Security Technology Planning Study from the Air Force, 1972. It is one of the first public documents from the federal government to talk openly about problems in computer security. And you can read these quotes. I'm not going to sit here and read them to you. But the concerns that are expressed and the problems that were faced by the Air Force in 1972 are not materially different than the problems that we face today and the way that we think about what we now call cyber risk management, right? You can see the precursor for everything we do from a cyber risk perspective in this 1972 document, from physical security to multi-tenant issues to the quality of code to insider threat, all these things all called out here, right? And this is what makes you think maybe the lines are at least never going to intersect, if not diverging. Because when you see this piece of art from almost 50 years ago, and you look at what we've accomplished today, you're going to be like, well, I have job security, but it's terrifyingly depressing that I have job security, right? I don't feel good about this kind of job security, right? I might be chasing ambulances, and the ambulances are literally getting built, and I'm just following them out the door. So it starts, I mean, this isn't like the starting point, like we can go back like the dawn of time, 2001, like wherever you want, but in my mind, like this is one of the big markers in the sand, transformative event, where people publicly started talking about computer security, 1972 Air Force Planning Study. Then there's been other things, like the Eternal September. Ha! I love this meme. Like this is like, I just needed a reason to use this. This is not the Eternal September that I was talking about, but nonetheless, I got to use the Han Solo meme. Was anyone alive? Does anyone know what the Eternal September is? Yes, Jeff, you must know, Jeff. I'm not calling you old. Okay, he wasn't paying attention. I'm glad I'm this compelling. I usually call people out like the gentleman up there who's leaving. Bye, sir. He didn't turn around. One time he turned around, it was actually a client of mine. He wasn't as amused as I thought he would be. Eternal September, September used to be a bad month on the internet, as if there needed to be, like, October is Cyber Awareness Month, and September was the shitty month. So every September in the late 80s and early 90s, freshmen would show up at college, and they would all get accounts, and they would all get provisioned onto Usenet. Had anyone in this room been on Usenet before? Okay. For those of you older than 35, there used to be a network of servers around the world that would pass, quote, news to each other. And it was really just forums, right? And people could pass around things, and it was really peer-to-peer networking before that was a term, where someone on one side of the world could post something, it would then flood across to a bunch of servers, and somebody on the other side of the world would eventually get the, I think you're wrong message. This is like Twitter before Twitter was a thing. It was just really slow. Like, you know, you had to have like a days-long argument. It couldn't unwind in a couple of hours. So, what? Yeah, you do it overnight. Yeah. No, I mean, when we were in Alaska, we had 2 T1s and 20,000 customers. And as it turns out, like we did our big Usenet transfers on the overnight because that's when only time we could sneak bandwidth away. Sir. Oh, because there was nothing new, right. Imagine if you could only update Twitter between 9 and 9:30 in the morning. Wow, you've been around, sir. I mean that in a good way. Good, as good as possible. So, the Eternal September, so what would happen, to rewind, every September, you get all the newbies who'd roll up on Usenet and be in all caps, hey, how do I use this thing? And you'd have to then explain netiquette, right? Like you'd be like, first of all, there's the caps lock key. Find it, hit it once, and then pull it off. And then talk like a normal human and be polite, right? And so by October, things had settled down, people had determined how to be human, and everything would be all right. September 1993, that was kind of the end of it, right? AOL had become a thing. There were a lot of other factors. Jeff pointed out a few of them during his talk. In 1993, the internet was really gaining momentum. And by the early 1994, there was this realization, like, the internet will never be the same. That influx of people, to be super clear, I got my first internet account in September of 1993. Like, I am part of the problem. And the problem persists today. Like, we have Twitter, right? Like, the Eternal September has become Twitter. Yeah, thank you. I'm it. I'm the proto-millennial, right? Like, before there were millennials, there was me screwing it all up, and now look what happened. So, proto-millennial. This has gone to some weird places. So, but it's hard to argue with the impact that the commercialization of the internet, NCSA Mosaic came out that year. All these things happened in 1993, which completely changed the face of the network. Before, it was like just a network. Then it became a way of delivering content to people. It became a way that we all interacted, and became a way we interacted as society, not just a bunch of industry and academic geeks, right? Which is really what it had been before, to the most part. So Another transformative event, I mentioned ASLR earlier. So ASLR is partially in response to, I mean, there's a lot of things going on, but the smashing the stack for fun and profit, who's heard of that paper? It's kind of a big piece of work. If you haven't, I recommend go reading it. LF1 wrote a paper called Smashing the Stack for Fun and Profit, and it was about how to basically find and write buffer overflows and use them to exploit a system, right? You write past the end of the buffer, at the return address, you jump to a place where you've written some shellcode, and poof, you can go execute whatever you want. You have interactive access to the system. And it's actually, when you read the paper, it's very approachable. And one of the reasons it's approachable is systems weren't that complicated back then, right? Like memory was in static places. When you compiled a thing, the address was always right there, and it was 32 bits, and it was like a piece of cake. And I could train interns to write buffer overflows in like an afternoon, and it was not that complicated. When, you know, in the mid-90s, like it seemed like every day on Bug Track, again, thank you, Jeff, for laying the ground on that. You know, on these different mailing lists and IRC chat rooms, people were coming up with new buffer overflow exploits and finding new things that they could go own and compromise. And it was just like the wild goddamn West. Because it was the original. It was ODE every day. It was. I mean, it was crazy. Like it just all the time. Like people just dropped ODE because it wasn't that complicated to find. It wasn't hard to write. And then there had been research done around limiting execution, address space layout randomization, things like that, that very rapidly became, instead of a research project, like we gotta do this to protect ourselves. So Microsoft started integrating ASLR into XP Service Pack 2 a little bit, but mostly Service Pack 3. And then it became more and more anti-exploit techniques were integrated into future versions of Windows, to the point now that it is really pretty difficult to do these kind of attacks anymore on like modern day instances of Windows, right? It is a very different world to write these attacks now than when it was. I mean, there was a bunch of stuff that happened with ROP and other exploit techniques, but we left the realm of being able to do like artisanal handcrafted exploits, which is really where we were in the mid-90s. Like you could sit down with a hex editor, your bare hand, and a bottle of Beam, and like in a half hour, you'd be pretty drunk and have a working exploit. That doesn't happen these days. You just get drunk, right? I mean, that's... It's not all bad. There's upside to that. So there were artisanal exploits. You're here for the show, folks. Like, I mean, I hope you're getting your money's worth out of it. So there were various UNIX security-isms that I think were transformative. You used to just be able to go to the password file as a normal user and read the password hashes. Like, can you imagine that world? Like, cat Etsy password. Wow, look at all those hashes. And they're hashed, oh, very simply. Excellent. And then we got the idea, like, maybe everybody shouldn't see the password hash. So then we created the shadow file, or whatever the hell it's called in Linux land, master. Is it shadow? Oh, shit, it's a FreeBSD-ism that's master.password. Curse you. Okay, I'm a FreeBSD person. Linux is an abomination to the entire planet. Bring it. I have whole talks on that. It's an accidental operating system, people. It shouldn't exist. Like, it's just because of force of will that you have Linux. The BSDs are actually an operating system. Linux is just a grand experiment. It's a social thing. It's stupid. Ham radio for the 21st century. I like it. You're here for the show. So, shadow passwords they limited the ability to see the hash. They put it in a root-only readable file. They got better hashing. And it was the precursor to what we think of today as password protection, right? All that stuff that happened on Unix. It wasn't Novell. It wasn't Windows. This was all driven by Unix. Novell, right? Yeah, NetWare. NetWare admins in the room. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, right? A few. Like, it was the easiest way to play Doom, right? Yeah, you get it. Like, IP address, I just hit IPX. Oh, look, I played Doom with my friends. Right, you all know that are older than 35. TCP wrappers was a application level service that allow you to control access to applications per IP address or per user or per a bunch of other crazy stuff. It's sort of like the precursor to a lot of the network-based access control that we think of now. It actually has a stronger authorization model than a lot of network-based access control that we have now. And you know, it was, I think, it had been around forever, and it was very effective at limiting people's ability to get to services. And I just want to call this out. FreeBSD jails have been around a long time. We just didn't have cute names for them like Kubernetes. So that's basically what Kubernetes is. It's a FreeBSD jail, except with a bunch of stuff around it to make it like possible for mortals to use. Tisk. We're not even. Anyway, I need to move forward because I'm literally getting long in the tooth, and I haven't even gotten to the material yet. So, browser sandboxing. This is a big deal. You used to be able to, like, I punched a hole in the browser and I got to the kernel and I choked it to death, right? Like, and that was all one move. It was like a martial arts movie, just like right through Firefox, you got the kernel, and it was super cool. And then the browser's like, hey, we might be a material part of the security of the planet. We should think about security a little bit. So they came up with things like browser sandboxing to try to isolate the browser so that if bad things happen, you were just punching the browser in the face and not actually getting all the way through to the kernel. Now we have things like site isolation in Chrome, where this is a really neat idea. Every tab has its own process, which is good because I think we need 64-bit process IDs now, right? Because Chrome is going to have about 1 billion processes on my box. I never close any tabs, ever, right? So it's cool and all. There's a memory issue that comes up, right? Like, this is becoming like Slackian when it comes to memory consumption. Yeah, anyone Slack memory use? Like, you ever notice Slack uses like 1 terabyte of memory, question mark? Woohoo, someone's like, I work for a memory provider, it's great, we have a relationship, if there's gonna be a monopoly about it later, we'll all be in jail. But like the last pwn to own had 2 UAFs, woo, and an integer overflow to get to the kernel, right? That's not trivial. That's a lot of work, and that was actually a short chain. There was one of the chains I saw a couple of years ago. It was like 10 steps to get from the browser to the kernel, right? That's not your, again, 30 minutes and a bottle of Jim Beam. That's like dedicated amount of work. That's a lot of tooling. That's a lot of expertise to do that. Browser-borne attacks that go after the operating system just really aren't a thing anymore. This is a step function. This is the thing that has materially changed what we do. Real quick, rise of online commerce and online fraud. So many moons ago when Amazon first came out, we had an opportunity to do public key-based credit card transactions through this thing called Secure Electronic Transaction. I was involved in a startup that was doing a SET-based network nationwide deployment of SET. It turns out Visa and MasterCard killed SET. Why? Because nobody wanted to reissue a bunch of cards with chips in them. You didn't want to reissue all the readers in the physical places to actually have chip and pin readers in the stores, because there wasn't that big of a threat of fraud in 1999. So we didn't do it. What happens? You fast forward, two decades plus or minus, and we have Target, we have Home Depot, and suddenly, oh my God, we have to do chip-in signature, right? Because like, it's something you have and something you scribble. Totally appropriate security. I hear that's what Duo's going for next year. So the signature thing is so goddamn stupid. The killer for me is like, that wasn't really online fraud. Like, Target was a crappy HVAC provider, cybersecurity, and Home Depot was whatever the hell it was. But like, they just went after, again, they weren't really going after the SSL connection. They just went after the people that had all the goddamn credit cards. Instead, the merchant would never actually have the card, right? It cryptographically would have been blinded. You would never have the problem where merchants have credit card numbers. It was impossible in the system for you to have a credit card number if we used SET and had deployed it in the mid-90s. But instead, all we have now is slightly more secure activity at the terminal, and people are still sitting around with credit card numbers in databases. Really goddamn stupid. Also, the standard that we use on the chips is 25 years old, right? EMV has been around forever. Turns out Europe has been using it for a stretch. We could have used it too. We chose not to, and now we're sitting here half-assing it without even a pin. So, sometimes I hide my feelings, usually when I'm asleep. This is my big point for the day. I think that ransomware is the greatest thing that's happened to small and mid-sized business security since it's existed. Why? Because they're all getting owned. And now they have to deal with it, right? Like, we've all had the calls like, hey, you're the security person in the family. My buddy, my friend, my sister, my whoever just got owned, and their box has got this flashing skull laughing at them and saying that I need to pay them in Bitcoin or Litecoin or Ethereum or something, and can you come help me? And I'm like, yeah, I will buy the Bitcoin and pay it for you, right? Like, because I'm sure you don't know how to use Coinbank. So my brother-in-law got hit, and his first instinct, I was like, it's probably like an Eastern European crime ring. He was like, I'm gonna fly to Eastern Europe and beat somebody up. I'm like, you're gonna die, right? Like, nothing about you landing in like a former Soviet republic, swinging a battle axe and like, find me the criminals. None of that's gonna end well for you. Let's just pay the $2,000 and get your files back. And he was very like, they're not gonna give me my files back. I'm like, if they didn't, their revenue model would be broken and no one would pay. So they have good customer service, and they have very good customer service. And they were very upfront, like, before you do this, you need to patch your systems, because if it happens again, it might be us again, and I can't take responsibility for it. So here's what we came in through. You should patch this. I'm like, thank you. And so we patched it and then applied it, and we got all those files back. It was insanity. So I do think this is causing a reformation in the small and mid-sized business world, where they're having to pay attention to these things. Because even if you don't get hit, your peers get hit, and that gets your attention, and that causes companies to think. So, okay, so now for the meat of the talk. You laugh, and literally I'm like, well, I will just fly through the next 10 slides, because what do I think the future holds? I'm gonna make some bold predictive statements that you can hold me to account in 10 years and tell me I was wrong about, and I will totally agree with you. So, first thing, the enterprise as we know it is gonna die, right? We are not going to own our own data centers. We are not going to have, God, please, Active Directory servers anymore. There will be a point. Active Directory is the biggest risk to any organization that still has them today. What about Novell? Yeah. Except for the companies that have Novell, in which they have the time machine, so like they can go to the future and get the good stuff, because they're obviously living in the fucking past. So for the pen testers in the room, when you're in AD land and you get on the one host and you have to do lateral movement, what do? Anything you want. You just roll around. Yay! It's so exciting. There's so many ways to move around inside of an Active Directory universe. If you're cloud only and you don't have AD, it is trench warfare. You go from box to box to box. It sucks, right? That's why AD is such a liability. We are at the point where companies are existing and growing that don't have AD, which was almost unthinkable 5 years ago, right? I think that we are terrible at running our own data centers, because when you run your own data center, what you're really saying is, I can do a better job than Amazon and Google, and I will say, that's bullshit. Like, 99.999% of the time, there's no way on God's earth you can. If you have a threat model that requires it to be internal, that's cool, but it turns out even the CIA doesn't have a threat model that requires their stuff being internal, right? They use Amazon's cloud. If it's good enough for them, sure shit should be good enough for you, full stop. Yay! Okay. So, we will have increased diversity in our tech stack. I think that, because frankly, developers are rabid squirrels, and they're just like, yay, shiny thing, and they integrate it in. And it's a challenge right now to like pump the brakes and say like, we need to do a third-party assessment of the random thing that you just bought from a random company in an Eastern European that has a built-in crypto miner. Like, that's cool. But it solves the problem we have with connecting to our core database. So we will see increased diversity, we'll see risk because of that, but I do think in general, what it means is we will run less of our own things and rely on others to do the one thing that they do very well. You will have a provider that's your cloud database provider, you have a provider that's your queue provider, you have a provider that's for your website and some other stuff. Everybody's gonna have discrete providers, it might all be Google or Amazon or a bunch of smaller providers, but it won't be you. What that also means is sysadmin is a dying trade, except for the people who actually run the big data centers like Amazon and whatnot, and even then, it's all disposable, right? When it breaks, it's one of a trillion, so you throw it away, right? You don't have to fix things in those universes. So I also did this in Old English because I have an axe to grind on wherefore art as a concept. What does wherefore art mean? Why? Yay! Other Shakespeare geeks, that's good. It turns out, like people will use wherefore like to mean where, and it turns out it doesn't mean where, it means why. Anyway, that was not really as funny as I thought it was gonna be. So, next up, privacy is gonna be a big deal, like really big deal in the future. Why? Companies are gonna get fined a lot of money, tons and tons of money. What does that really mean? right now in the US, there's not a single regime to drive us. There's a CCPA, there's gonna be a Nevada law, there'll be other state laws. It is going to be chaos, and it's going to affect everybody in this room, and you're gonna have to figure out how to deal with these privacy issues, both from a compliance perspective and an actually doing it right perspective, because those two things aren't necessarily the same, right? You can be compliant, like say, I don't know, PCI compliant, Jeff, and still get owned, I don't know, Home Depot. And so you can be GDPR, you can't be GDPR compliant, by the way. I have somebody who's trying to give, where's your GDPR certification? I'm like, that's not a thing. I don't know how to tell you that, but yeah, it's like, yeah, didn't get sued is my certification. No active lawsuits, yay, that's my certification. I'll put the seal up. If the seal ever says number of active lawsuits, non-zero, then you can fire me. It turns out, though, we really don't know anything about privacy engineering. And when I say we, I mean a body of people bigger than a few hundred, right? There are a few hundred people in this country who are good at privacy and good at bringing together the privacy kind of policy issues and the societal issues of it with the actual engineering, the software, the infrastructure concerns, and that kind of thing. Very few people understand that. And are you one of them, sir? Is it slow nod? Yes, okay. He's very hireable. So you write him a large check because whoever, you will get a lot of money, sir, I promise you. Yeah, he's thumbs up. He's like, yeah, I'm very excited. It's going to be a very hot area. We're all going to be clamoring for the same thing. It's going to make the rush to hire cybersecurity people, I think, look like child's play. It's going to be a bad scene. If you're looking to get started now, the NIST Privacy Framework draft is out. It's a good place to start. I don't think the final is going to look that different. I worked with NIST to help create the cybersecurity framework, and I did a little work with them on the privacy framework as well. And knowing how they work, the draft that's out right now is probably 95% what the final will be. Our company, Expel, we have or will have released on the website shortly a self-assessment tool for the privacy framework. It's not part of our business, it's not what we do. It's just I release my internal security stuff publicly so that you all can benefit from it because we're all slaying the same dragons. And I would encourage you, if you can do it too, like we released our third-party assessment process, our CSF, our privacy framework, our incident response tabletopping process, we release all that. If you have things that you can do that are repeatable, please work with your company to release them because we're all trying to solve exactly the same problem, right? So please go home, do that as a, yeah, anyway. Real quick, the future holds from a defense perspective. When we think about security operations, and I've been doing security operations for a long time prior to working where I work now, you're only as good as the signal that you can receive, right? Whatever's being emitted from your organization, you can only transact. It's the same as the first graph, right? If I can't see it, I can't instrument it, I can't understand if it's good or bad, and therefore I can't make determinations about incidents in my network. We've gotten pretty good at that enterprise thing inside of our walls, inside of our own data center. I can introspect really well and get a hold of it. What I can't do is in a cloud provider with Salesforce. Hey, Salesforce, I'd like to see like the state of all the patching of your servers. Could you like give me a live feed so I can do a vulnerability scan of your data center? Right, yeah. No. Hey, Salesforce, can I see when this person logged in last? Maybe, if you're pay enough, right? Like, that's the level of introspection I get. We are going to go through a period where, as in the previous slide, we move away from our own enterprise and we go to the cloud. We're going to be like, I'm blind. I can't see anything. So cloud provider, I'm going to discriminate my buying based on how good a job I can do of getting signal to be able to operate to protect myself. That'll become not as important as the functionality, but more important than it is now. It'll be table stakes that they'll have to express and provide more signal for us to be able to actually see what's going on. Steve Ballmer's doing the developers dance. Woo! Developers. Again, if you're older than 35, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. Automation will change things, I think, pretty dramatically. Frankly, there aren't enough of us to go around, and it is going to require us to automate our jobs. There are things that the robots can do better than us, and we need to hold our vendors to account to help automate that, right? SOAR products and things like that are a good addition to a lot of organizations, but frankly shouldn't have to exist because you would hope the rest of your security stack has enough automation in it to help do some of these things. Kind of my bold statement there. We are going to have to rely on automation because we can't breed enough of us. And I don't mean like, biologically breed. I just mean straight up like train us fast enough to do this work. Attackers, two real quick things and I'll close it out. Exploits are becoming harder and harder to find. I think that, I mentioned earlier, like humans continue to be susceptible to bludgeoning, right? We're just big sacks of water. And we know, and we've known for a long time, if you puncture us with high velocity things, like the water all comes out and it's a bad day. And we haven't been able to, armed with that knowledge, like make ourselves better, right? We're still big squishy things of water. We knew about attacks of like, hey, people are smashing the stack and causing exploits to happen, and now we can fix it so that can happen. We put countermeasures in our network all the time. When we see an attack, we have an IOC that we can inoculate ourselves against immediately across our enterprise, right? That means as attackers, as we find more and more attacks in the network, we continue to neck down the body of knowledge that the attackers have based on known exploits, based on their ability to move, all kinds of things. And at some point, system-level access via exploits stops really being a material thing that we have to worry about. Not because it wouldn't be bad, but because there's so many countermeasures in place, it's so hard to do it, we're not going to see them anymore. So put another way, it's all about the data. We see that today. Attackers work on getting data, not access. It used to be access. And nation-state actors still do that, right? Nation-state actors doing intelligence operations still want access. And that threat's not going to change. But for general run-of-the-mill adversaries, for criminals, things like that, hacktivists, you're not going to see that focus. The focus is to get to the goddamn data, and they're going to be leveraging legitimate access to do illegitimate things. That's where the future of attack, that's where we kind of land now, and that's where we're going in the future. Also, this is a pen test. Literally, the piece of paper that you see there is the testing of pens, which it took me a while to find. Very excited to have found that. Because of all of those things, those of you that are pen testers are going to find your job changing dramatically in the next decade. Breaking into systems will not be as cookie cutter as it is now. And I'm not here to impugn pen testing as a religion. I've been paid to break into stuff for a long time, and me and my company, we were very good at breaking into things. But a lot of what we did was very bespoke. People would hand us a thing and be like, break into it. Okay, and we would figure out a way to do it, but most of it was impossible to do with like run-of-the-mill, off-the-shelf type stuff. I think that's going to become the rule, not the exception. And it's also going to involve authority that you don't have, right? Again, hey, Salesforce, I'd like to run a pen test against you because one of your customers wants me to. That's funny, right? There are all kinds of things that you won't be able to test, and we're going to have to find different ways to evaluate security controls that are somewhere between audit and actual online assessment, because I can't pen test because I don't have the authority, and audits just pretend, so where's the middle ground? See what I did there? All right. With that, it is 5 o'clock straight up. You've all been a wonderful audience. And also, I want to thank BSides Raleigh for inviting me down. This has been outstanding. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.